Martin Luther King was a radical black militant.
Dr. Martin Luther King may be assassinated here, KKK ones, and this was the Indiana KKK. This isn't a national headline from somewhere else. This is talking about what's going on in Indianapolis.
I didn't know that he came to Indiana as much as he did. I didn't know about like all the articles about him from the Indiana news.
Like as a kid, I was more taken by Malcolm X than I was by Martin Luther King, but when you actually read it, they were much closer together, and especially at the end, they were much closer together than they were further apart. And when you see all of that, you're like, okay, he wasn't just some pacifist. He wasn't just trying to integrate lunch counters so we could all eat lunch together. Like, it was a lot more to it than that.
Also should be noted that the colonists were, very much high on Dr. King, but they were concerned that many of the attendees, at least from Indianapolis, were excited to hear about Dr. King's work in the South, but had no consideration and didn't ask any questions about how to do any of that here.
Like when we think of Martin Luther King, we never hear anything about him ever coming to Indianapolis.
I also found out that a lot of preachers and pastors here in the city did not agree with Dr. King and wouldn't allow him to come speak at their churches here, which I found that pretty interesting too as well.
The March on Washington, even going to Chicago or Harlem, you never hear about anything he ever did in Indianapolis, but he did come here, so, because we had our own issues.
Martin Luther King, the good, the bad, the challenging, he presented a lot of facts, not only about Dr. King, but about our city, city leaders, our church leaders, black and white, the negative and the positive responses, and it makes you want to take a deeper dive into what all was going on. Dr. King's life was more than just I have a dream. He said a lot of things that were very controversial, probably caused him some static, but nevertheless, he stood on what he said, or as the young people say, he stood on business.
One of the biggest things that they take out of context with Martin Luther King is his I Have a Dream speech. Like, he talks about his kids being judged by the content of the character and, their heart, but not by their color. But he also talks about a police brutality in that same speech. He talks about that there won't be any rest or tranquility until the Negroes get full citizenship rights. And so it's like they use that part, the very, very, very peaceful part and the aspirational part, but then they don't talk about the black militancy in there, about how, no, we're going to get this, and we demand our rights, and that we're going to fix some of this stuff.
Mr. Wildstyle lifted up the important quotes that help focus on what Dr. King's message to not only the nation but Indianapolis